Today we are going to give you some maybe behind the scenes is a better phrase about what technical soundness is and how you all can really help your teams focus in on everything that the online strategic planning tool has to offer and how that can really facilitate moving the needle forward and improving strategic plans and helping teams reach their goals at the end of the year. So my name is Alycia Sternberg-Mahan, and I am a PhD student at Western Michigan University. And I am in the program Evaluation, Measurement, and Research. And so my expertise that I bring to the table is all about strategic planning and evaluation. All right. So the purpose of this presentation today is threefold. The first is to increase your knowledge on what defines technical soundness. And the second is to increase your knowledge of why technical soundness is used and why the center is using it. And the third is to increase your knowledge on how to improve strategic planning using technical soundness. So for today's agenda, we are going to talk about four main concepts. The first is, what is technical soundness? The second is, why is technical soundness important? The third is that we're going to go through all of the various components of technical soundness and really break down all of those components that you're seeing in the tool, from the goal to the tasks that the teams input, all the way to the outcomes, the indicators, and the data sources. So we're going to go through each of those things, talk about an evaluator, how an evaluator evaluates these plans, and then talk about how the center is conducting technical soundness. So let's answer that first question. What is technical soundness? So technical soundness is a tool used to evaluate and improve strategic planning. And this really helps your teams reach their goals by the end of the year. And so what the center did with Western Michigan University is create this lovely Excel spreadsheet that I have snipped on the right-hand side. And what it does is it populates all of the information that the teams put into the tool, and it puts it into this beautiful Excel spreadsheet. And then what an evaluator does is they go through what is called these quality check questions or statements. And so the evaluator will do these quality checks for each of these various components and then categorize them to say, yes, the team met the quality check. The team partially met the quality check. They did not. And then if appropriate, the evaluator will then go through and give some statements to the team on how to improve the quality. So let's talk about why this is important. Why is technical soundness important? Why are we talking about it? So back in 2016 and also 2018, Dr. Gothberg and Dr. Kohler presented at the American Evaluation Association on their study. And what they did is they gathered all of these state and local plans from NTACT, who was using the online strategic planning tool. And what they noticed was that plans with a higher rating of technical soundness were more likely to reach their goals at the end of the year. So what does this mean? This means that teams who are having better strategic plans, who are completing their plans, are more likely to reach their goals by the end of the year, which is what we all want, right? We want to meet their goals. We want to move the needle. And they found this at a statistically significant p-value of 0.0002. So we know this is really important, and this is why we want to bring it to the Florida Center as well. So what makes up a technically sound plan? A technically sound plan includes a goal that addresses a relevant need, is linked to an evidence-based or promising practice, and is related to an outcome. Let's think about what we do as facilitators when we sit down with our teams. So we first have the teams assess their needs and their strengths based on all of the evidence base and promising practices from the taxonomy with post-secondary comprehensive programs. And then what the team does is they evaluate their strengths and needs, and then they indicate a priority. So they use the STAR system and then indicate this benchmark or this domain is really important for our team. And so let's create a goal around that. And then they sit down and think, okay, what are all of our tasks? What are all of our activities or action items that we're going to complete this year in order to reach our goal? And they list all their tasks out. They list the person responsible from their team who's going to hold their team accountable. And then they list a projected completion date for which that task will be completed. They then list out all of the outputs or all of the products that will be a result from the tasks that they complete. And then they indicate if we as a team complete all these tasks by the projected completion date, we will get a result of these outputs. What is our outcome that we wish to see at the end of the year? So then the team will go through and list a measurable outcome, again, that they can measure at the end of the year, in hopes that they will evaluate that outcome or that process to that outcome, both at the mid-year and at the end of the year report. And so going back to this flow chart, what we really want to see is exactly that, some flow between a goal that leads to tasks, that leads to outputs and outcomes. So first thing is first, the teams need to address a goal that addresses a need that they have as a team and is linked to that evidence-based promising practice and is related to a measurable outcome that they can measure at the end of the year. In addition to that, a technically sound plan articulates the link between the tasks and the people responsible for completing those tasks, the projected completion dates, as well as the outputs that are a result of completing those tasks, and anticipated outcomes of the annual goal. And what this does, it really provides an accountability framework for the team in order to plan for a sound evaluation and useful results at the end of the year. And this goes back to that strategic plan or that continuous improvement model that Drew was talking about. In the fact that the teams create a plan, they then evaluate that plan and then work towards how they can go on to the next strategic plan for the next year. All right, so let's go into all of these various components of technical soundness. And these are exactly the terms that are used in the online strategic planning tool. So you have your goal, the tasks that the teams will complete, the output, the people responsible, the projected completion date. And then we have this area within the online strategic planning tool called outcomes, where the teams list outcomes, indicators in their data sources. So what we're going to do is talk about each of these various components and how an evaluator would go ahead and evaluate each of these components. And the first one is the goal. So after the teams indicate that they would like to make a plan, they will then input their goal that is associated with a specific benchmark under a specific domain. And for example here, our example goal is that our students demonstrate self-determination skills. When this is populated into that technical soundness tool, the evaluator will ask the question or use this statement that the goal is articulated as an outcome, not as a task, output, or product. And so I've provided us with a few examples here. And you can see the examples on the right-hand side. I'm going to list or read some of these to you all. The first is by the end of each semester, all incoming students will participate in a person-centered planning aligned with students' career goals. And as you can see, this is listed or phrased in terms of an outcome. It's not listed as a task or an action item. and it's not listed as an output or product, otherwise a tangible, we'll say a noun or a tangible thing. Another example would be increase student access and use financial aid as needed to support their program enrollment and completion. So again, this is an outcome. It's a change in behavior, knowledge, or condition. The third is to increase student participation in community-based internships. And the fourth is our faculty demonstrate teaching practices that meet the needs of all learners. Some non-examples I've provided us on the right-hand side. The first one would be to establish person-centered planning. Why this would not be a goal is because it's a task or an action item. So this is something that the team will do throughout the year, not a goal that they wish to see at the end. Another example would be to evaluate the existing MOUs and analyze for replication for new partnership development. The third would be to develop a proposal for multiple faculty development presentations. And the fourth would be to work with legal counsel to develop release of information. So again, as you can see, all of these are very action-oriented and don't look at a change that they wish to see by completing such tasks at the end of the year. The second thing that we evaluate is our task list. So here are some examples that I provided to you all. So if our goal is to increase self-determination with our students, our task list should align with that goal. So here are some tasks. Number one, to identify appropriate self-determination tool. Number two, administer the self-determination assessment tool. Number three, review that data to identify students' self-determination strengths and needs. Number four, identify and develop strategies to address and improve specific needs, so on and so forth. And what the evaluator does is look at that and say, are the tasks listed sufficient to accomplish the goal that the team wrote? And this is kind of looked at in two ways. The first is, are these tasks aligned with the goal? Because sometimes teams create a goal, but then their tasks don't align with what they wish to accomplish at the end of the year. And then the second thing that we look at is, are there enough tasks that the team will accomplish the goal at the end of the year? So sometimes what we see is maybe one task is listed or two, and that could be just due to time with their team planning time. And sometimes it's that we haven't pushed our teams enough to help them think about what are all the things that you want to or need to accomplish throughout this year in order to reach your goal at the end of the year. And if you can't reach your goal, should we then go back and revise our goal so that it matches the tasks that we are able to accomplish? So it's like eating a crumb of the pie instead of the whole pie, right? So revising it. All right, so I went through some examples that I kind of shared with you with our overarching strategic plan, but here are some non-examples. And really, these are outputs is what I would call them. These are products of completing a task. But here are some things that are listed: grant application, a CTE survey, peer mentorship program, or like I said before on the previous slide, maybe there are tasks listed, but there aren't enough tasks listed in order for the team to accomplish their goal. All right, so the third thing that we evaluate would be the output section. And what we wish to see here is that there is a one-to-one ratio for our tasks and outputs. Therefore, if there are 7 tasks, your team should also have 7 outputs. And the evaluation statement that the evaluator will use is that the tangible outputs are identified for each task. So sometimes what I wish or that I suggest that the teams use is a numbering system. So they'll number all their tasks, and then they know task 1 aligns to output 1 and task 2 aligns to output 2, so on and so forth. But that's just a preference based on each and everyone's teams. And what you want to think about is that the output is really your tangible product from the team completing their task. Therefore, in 2 slides before that, I said that the task was to identify a self-determination tool. Therefore, as a result of that, the team will have an output or a product of a self-determination tool. If the team's task is to administer the self-determination assessment, then as a result of that, the team will have self-determination data. If the team is to assess the student's strengths and needs, then as a result of that, it would be a document of all the students' strengths and needs. So again, here are some examples that I just shared, but some non-examples would be to review a self-determination tool. And why this is a non-example is because this is a task. It's not a tangible output or a tangible product. Another non-example would be analyzing effective curriculum or creating a survey for faculty to get input. Or sometimes what we see is that the output itself or the outputs listed are not in relation to the tasks that the team put into their tool, into their plan. All right, so the next step that teams do is to identify a person responsible for each of these tasks. And this gets a little tricky because we say person responsible in the tool, but really what it is the team member who is going to hold the team accountable for completing that task. So what we want to see here is a specific name and or a title that is identified for each of these tasks. So here are some examples. I put in the names of individuals from the Florida Center. So a good example would be Janice or Drew or Iris. And each of these members of the team are going to be in charge of specific tasks within their plan, within their strategic plan. And they themselves are going to kind of put on the hat for that task and really ensure that the team is going to complete that task by the projected completion date or by the end of the year. Another good example of this would be to list the title of the individual. And so maybe your team members don't know the name of the individual, but they can put like assistant director or new coordinator, so on and so forth. What are some non-examples would be those generic terms. So staff, team, everyone, listing everyone's names on the team, or some offices such as student services or career development. And really that, again, it doesn't put any ownership on specific tasks for specific team members. And what we found is that if your team members are taking ownership of pieces of the strategic plan, things are going to get done by the end of the year. All right, and then the next part is the projected completion date. And really what we're looking for is something simple like a date that is specified for the completion of each task. And normally we don't have any problems with this area with technical soundness. Typically teams put in a date, but some non-examples would be that maybe the team does not list a date, or maybe the team actually carried over their strategic plan from last year and did not they didn't look at the dates again for this coming year and plan again for this coming year. And then what I would also stress to us as facilitators is ask your team, is the projected date actually feasible? So again, this is looking through, is the team biting off more than they can chew? Or are all the dates kind of clustered in one semester? Can we spread it out? Just ask your team, is this feasible for you all to complete? We all know that as the year goes, we have cycles of busyness and we have cycles of slowness. And so ask your team, can you complete all of that before December or before the beginning of the year when things are a little bit more stressful, or can you move it to a different time? All right, and then the next area is also a one-to-one ratio. And this would be the outcome section. In the outcome section, the teams will input an outcome, an indicator associated with that outcome, and then a data source associated with that indicator as well as that outcome. Let's talk about the outcome first and how we evaluate that. So the quality check for the outcome area is that outcomes are articulated as a change in knowledge, a change in behavior, or a change in condition. So this is something that we want to measure at the end of the year to look for a change, an improvement in. Here are some examples. The first one is increased faculty knowledge for using universal designs in their courses. The second is students gain independent living skills for off-campus housing. And the third is students will meet minimum standards for assignment completion. And they've defined this as more than half of the assignments completed monthly. And last but not least, there is an example of increased enrollment to 15 students per year. So all of these examples indicate a change in something: increased faculty knowledge, gain independent living skills, will meet minimum standards, will have increased enrollment. Typically it's an increase, but it's not to say that teams won't say decrease or will gain or will meet these requirements. Some non-examples would be applicant interviews, develop curriculum for class on self-determination, and faculty hold high expectations for their students. Let's talk about this third one right here. So faculty hold at high expectations for their students. That would be a good goal or a good start to an outcome, but let's push it a little bit further and say, how can we measure the high expectations that faculty hold for their students? And then, as I've repeated, what also we see in this area is that teams will put in really good outcomes in terms of indicating a change, but they're not aligned with the tasks that they put above in the outputs that they listed above in their strategic plan. For the indicator section, really what we're looking for is that the indicators listed are units of measurement, and that helps identify progress towards the outcome. An example here is if we want to demonstrate an increase in self-determination skills, then I have a unit of measurement of the number of students who request support in their academic areas. So if I want to increase faculty knowledge of UD concepts, then my unit of measurement would be the number of faculty who complete a training in UD concepts. If I want to measure an increase in living independently, then I could measure that by the percentage of students living independently after their program. If I want to show how students are meeting the minimum standard or the minimum requirement, I can measure that by the percentage of assignments completed. And if I want to increase and have students be enrolled at 15 every semester or throughout the year, then I'm going to measure that by the number of students enrolled. Some non-examples would be course sequence and syllabi. Students will advocate for themselves, attendance in class, or that the indicator does not align with the outcome that they listed above. All right, and then the last component of the outcome section is to talk about the data sources. And really these sources are identified, these sources identified provide evidence of progress towards the outcome. So again, we're looking at, we have our units of measurement. Where are we going to find those units of measurement? What are our data sources that we're going to use? So again, if I want to look at the number of faculty who attended the webinar on UD concepts, I'm going to look at my data source of webinar attendance records. If I want to look at the percentage of students who are living independently after their program, I'm going to use my data source for a post-program follow-up survey. If I'm looking at the percentage of assignments completed, maybe my data source is a Canvas course assignments or a checklist of completion, so on and so forth. Some non-examples would be course syllabi, course assessment, student enrollment, or that the data source does not align with the outcome and indicator listed above. Right, and the last thing that the technical soundness tool looks at is overall quality of the plan. And so what we're looking for is there enough detail in this plan for someone outside the team to implement it? And this really looks at the sustainability of the strategic plan. And really, if teams have turnover or people lose positions, so on and so forth, someone on the team can take the strategic plan, look at it, and really know how to implement it throughout the coming year. And so this question of overall quality is also evaluated. So how is the center conducting technical soundness? And what happens is they use this Excel spreadsheet that is actually populated within the tool. And so again, as I stated before at the beginning of this presentation, what happens is teams input all of their information, and then this is populated into the Excel spreadsheet. And then the evaluator goes through and does a quality check for each of these components that we just talked about, and then categorizes them and provides some information on how the team can improve quality in each of these component areas. So I'm going to show you a live version of the Excel spreadsheet. Can you still see the Excel spreadsheet?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Great, awesome. Okay, so this is just a live version of what the Excel spreadsheet looks like. And as you can see, the evaluator can go through and mark yes, partially, or no for each of these. We'll put some in the boxes here just so that you can see. And then what occurs at the bottom is that each plan gets a final technical soundness score. And this number really isn't important for facilitators or team leaders, because what it is important for is that more for the center. So what the center does is it uses this to create a quantitative value or variable for technical soundness for each of the plans that are created. And then the center can then run statistical analyses based on these final scores and or help teams in the future improve in certain sections.